With summer tournament season raging on and American television revolving around some of the biggest shows on the calendar, August hit the ground running with a lot of good stuff. This one is going to be on the longer side, so best not to waste any more time. As always, a reminder that I haven't seen every single match to have taken place, and the ones I do choose to talk about are all based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else. A slight spoiler warning, as I will be talking about match finishes here too. After watching 169 matches spanning 15 promotions, here are my favorites from the first half of August. Many will point to this as a reminder of what the G in G1 stands for, and rightfully so. It's the peak of a good tournament from Hirooki Goto, opposing an athletic freak in Takeshita who's run roughshod on the competition. One of the last remaining members of the old guard takes a stand against a younger opponent who outclasses him in every physical aspect. Takeshita wastes no time to put Goto at a disadvantage, immediately forcing him to fight from underneath. The DDT on the floor is one of those moves that suits Takeshita so well, that spontaneous shot that emphasizes the dynamic of this thing just as it begins. Aside from the tope sequence, the rest here is all kept within the ropes. Goto's strategy is to survive and overcome, but the explosiveness of all of Takeshita's cutoffs does not make it easy. This give and take creates a massive upswell in the Nagoya audience, providing the exact atmosphere you'd want in this situation. The infectious rally behind Goto makes this heroic effort all the more satisfying and amplifies the many near falls down the stretch. An underdog story packed to the brim with huge offense and an emotional hook is ideal for a tournament match, and it's best to take that ride yourself, and I'll spare the play-by-play. It's a very direct match, and I think it greatly benefits from that. Goto would win with the GTR to prove there's still some magic left amongst the old guard. An incredibly endearing win to cap off one of the best matches of the tournament. Even in my case of cherry-picking matches, I was pleasantly surprised with the high points of the block matches. It felt like the run NJPW needed, and it even changed my outlook on some wrestlers I was not going out of my way for much of the year. Some other tournament matches I'd recommend from this window are Takeshita vs Bolton, Zack Sabre Jr. vs Sonata, and the Shingo vs Great Okan match in the quarterfinal. In the build to the All-In main event, Bryan Danielson has been presented as a sleeping giant. In the weeks Double J has been brought into his orbit, he's looked to galvanize Dragon into becoming the best version of himself, which brings us to this Anything Goes contest from August 7th. With a strong motivational tactic, Jarrett opens the match by ambushing Bryan with his acoustic guitar during his entrance, and with that one swing, madness ensues. It's wild taking into consideration the mileage on these two, and the awareness of these late-stage Danielson matches with the injuries he's carrying, only to be treated to Bryan getting thrown into a concrete wall and these two trading suplexes on a steel trash can holder. In his AEW run, we've seen Danielson dropped into different subgenres of matches and thriving, and now placed into a Jarrett arena brawl, he delivers once again. Swerve Strickland carries the reputation of being the most dangerous man in the company, so I understand Jarrett's thought process of using a wild, messy brawl to prepare Bryan for whatever lies under the arch in a few weeks. And you can see the change in Bryan's demeanor unfold, especially when they're back at ringside, biting Jarrett in the corner and breaking out some particularly explosive offense on the outside. It's here where Jarrett improvises and smashes Bryan's knee in midair, and here the match gives you something more to sink your teeth into. The brawling was great as is, and I didn't think they necessarily needed to tighten the focus, but by doing so, it gave Bryan the push he needed, with one more obstacle to overcome. Also, firing up out of a spider superplex is never not going to work for me. My biggest takeaway from this section of the match is every single action having consequences, specifically with Bryan's injured knee. It's a great back against the wall performance in a year full of them. Everything here just works, from the violence to the character work, and especially the pacing. For a combined age of 100 years old, they went nuts for the entire 15 minutes. Appropriately, the chairs littered throughout the match play into the finish, with Bryan reinforcing his Busaiku knee with the steel. Now conditioned for the task at hand, all roads lead to Wembley. I'm glad we got Danielson Jarrett before it was all said and done, and I appreciate just how much they put into the final product. Ever since Ryohei Oiwa chose Pro Wrestling Noah for his rookie excursion, these two are on a collision course. tag team partners turned rivals due to opposing motivations finds Oiwa with something to prove, headed into their meeting in the N1 Victory Tournament. I think this match shines within its simple ideas and its dedication to sticking to them. Oiwa enters this match to out-wrestle Kaito Kiyomiya, and when he is able to bring things to ground, he succeeds. He sticks to this game plan as long as possible, with an unwavering commitment to those holds. When Kaito looks to implement striking or aerial offense, Oiwa has the answer by simply going back to the well. For Kaito, it's a matter of legwork, though it's thwarted fairly early. When he is able to resume, there's a bit more venom behind his dragon screws and leg drops. Think about it from Kaito's perspective. He's the world champion in a Korakuen Hall main event, being out-wrestled by a New Japan graduate on excursion. To add insult to injury, the Korakuen faithful are very much behind Oiwa and are receptive to every hold. This lays the foundation for the match to take a more bombastic turn late, and I think you can read it in a few ways. The first being that the two were way too focused on winning how they wanted to, only for the time limit to creep up on them, or the more cynical approach that they were padding for the draw. I can see both, especially considering that going the distance is never easy. It's ambitious to begin with, let alone the decision as to how they went about it. For that, it's certainly a match that sticks out compared to everything else going on in main event scenes or within tournament season. And if you want something different from the status quo of modern main events, you might get a lot out of this. I do have my criticisms, mainly going back and forth with how much I enjoyed the work, only for it to be somewhat inconsequential in regards to the latter stages. However, for how much I'm on here praising when a wrestler implements strategy, these two did everything in their power to do so until the sprint to the finish. For that, I'd be lying if I say I didn't really enjoy this. I think the draw makes a ton of sense despite the time limit inflation. It's not going to cost them too much in their respective tournament paths, and with little to separate the two, leaves room for the eventual rematch. I wouldn't be surprised if we pick up this discussion once I get to that in September. Dragongate had a strong start to the month. There was a lot to like between the August 1st Korakuen and Dangerous Gate, with Dragon Daya's first defense of the Brave Gate being a particular highlight. Pro Wrestling Noah's Junta Miyawaki makes a guest appearance here as Daya's challenger, which makes for an interesting matchup. Junta is not always put in a position to succeed by his home promotion, and that's putting it lightly. I was curious to see what he could do in this environment, especially given his history with Toryuman Casa in Mexico. Junta gave a very focused effort in this match, immediately going after Daya's left arm. He rarely strays from this game plan, and it feels urgent in delivery. He's looking to put Daya away as soon as possible, with the threat of the double wrist lock established very early. Daya is consistent with his selling, and in the instances where he is caught in a Kimura or an armbar, does a good job of building suspense for a match with admittedly an obvious result. Though his arm is compromised, Daya is able to rely on his speed to navigate the situation. By pushing the pace, they're able to string together the high-impact sequences with Junta's control and submission attempts, and the result is a very balanced 10 minutes. It's refreshing to see this type of match lean into the limb targeting to this degree. I feel other places may prioritize a fireworks show in this spot, or establish the limb work early and abandon it in the later stages. Daya's eventual win is found through hanging in long enough to find the openings for a flurry of explosive offense, leading to double cork and DDDDT to secure the pinfall. While my thoughts on this are on the shorter side, this was a very easy watch, and I look forward to seeing what this Daya reign will bring in the fall. In what is heavily implied as a makeup for their SummerSlam match getting cut short, these two finally delivered something great. Like the Gable trilogy, it's the TV main event that stands apart from their pay-per-view efforts. No feeling out process is necessary, though this opening exchange tells us a lot. Bron Breakker tries to overwhelm Sami Zayn with his freakish strength from the jump. Sami throws caution to the wind, willing to take the risk of a Terminator dive so early into the match to find an answer. It is not enough out of the commercial break, and upon return, we get a crash course on Bron's ability to wreak havoc, which is only complemented by Sami's babyface performance. The pop-up power slam cutoff in particular is a nasty example of how fast Bron can turn things on its head, a nice bit of foreshadowing for things to come. For Sami, it keeps him on the back foot for a great deal of this first fall. In spite of that, he steals the opening frame with a haluva kick, which is a good choice in my opinion. For Breakker to successfully defend now, it has to be in the most definitive fashion. Zayn tries to capitalize on his advantage by staying aggressive, though it's his undoing in the second fall. One too many risks leads to being tossed headfirst into the timekeeper's area, which was just an insane spot. I appreciate his dedication for taking that. It's the turning point of the fall, as the match would settle into the rhythm of Bron dominating in the ring, only for Sami to find these glimpses of hope. The swing of the pendulum feels like Zayn is coming up to the surface for air, only before being dragged back down by the champion. Given that this is an all-time babyface we're dealing with, Sami Zayn made it appear that the victory was never truly out of reach. There's very few who can instill that in me like he can, and it makes him a great foil to the force of nature opposing him. That investment makes the outcome all the more sobering. Bron wins fall number 2 with his spear, which raises the question of what will have to come next if he's to win the third. In what appears to be a break for the challenger, Sami hits one more haluva kick, but he can't secure the limb on the pinfall attempt. He goes for broke in response. One final gamble finds Sami picked out of midair with another spear, legitimizing Bron Breakker's title reign in the process. This is very much Bron's match, but I don't think this goes as well as it did without Sami Zayn's contributions. He's able to maximize Breakker's sheer force with his bumping and selling, and the way he's able to drive the escalation in the later stages of this match is special. I do my best to tune out outside perception, but I can't wrap my head around the portion of the WWE audience rejecting Sami's solo push this year. He's been the common denominator in a lot of the promotion's best matches in 2024, and is often the emotional core of them as well. Here, it was no different. This was the very last thing I watched before recording, and I couldn't be happier with that decision. This is a drunk match, which you could assume that both participants would be under the influence, as they're required to drink after short intervals in the ring. I couldn't find the exact rules in English, so consider this up to interpretation. It's full of the slapstick that you'd expect, but there's a shift in the match around the dreaded tequila round, and not just in blood alcohol content. Harashima attempts to induce nausea by attacking Takanashi's abdomen, only to be saved as the champ's hit single rings throughout Shinjuku face. Takanashi looks to return the favor upon the restart, applying pressure to Harashima's head, as well as using rolling combinations to throw him off his axis. I think it's awesome that they went to these lengths within a comedy match. It's clever strategy that not only makes sense, but actually allows them to build an anticipation for the larger comedic moments. Take for instance, Harashima's motor skills letting him down over time, as he goes flying into the ropes after a long setup of a somato. It's a wonderful punchline for all the build. Amongst all the silliness, you have to remember the caliber of wrestler involved. Harashima at 50 is still one of the best on the planet, and Masahiro Takanashi's abilities are generally underappreciated. I think in a scenario like this, they're committed to the bit, but are able to hit that sweet spot to where the work will speak for itself. Things get convoluted when the match becomes an impromptu gauntlet of other members of the roster, and I personally could have done without that, but for how ridiculous this match is, it's a minor complaint. Another somato gone wrong gives Takanashi the opening for a roll-up victory, capping off an insane 12 minutes. Everyone will have their own threshold when it comes to the goofier side of DDT, so you might not get as much out of this as I did, but I had such a great time with this. When it comes to comedy matches this year, I'd have this right up there with the Hirata Akiyama match from the spring. We all need a good laugh, and I got one from Pro Wrestling thanks to these two. And before I go, here are some honorable mentions. Carta Brava Jr., Demus, and Elio del Alibrije versus Elio del Canis Lupus, Hellboy, and Puma de Oro from IWRG August 1st. If anything, worth seeking out to watch Demus get smashed into a beer fridge. It's available for free on their YouTube page around the 2 hours and 11 minute mark. Meiko Satomura vs Bayley from WWE, air date August 2nd. I'm glad this made tape for the occasion alone, and I thought Meiko gave Bayley something incredibly fresh compared to her opponents in recent memory. Rei Saito vs Yuma Anzai from All Japan, August 3rd. A lot of what makes this match work deals with Yuma Anzai getting his ass kicked, and I've praised that aspect of his game a lot. A little inconsistent on Saito's part, but a good effort for being in this spot all things considered. Darby Allin vs. The Butcher from AEW August 9th. The latest edition of Darby Death with some especially nasty falls. The Butcher rules, and I like to see AEW use him more often. Ryo Mizunami vs. Rika Tatsumi from TJPW August 10th. Another performance from Aniki that I enjoyed quite a bit, fighting from underneath to overcome one of the better workers in the promotion. Ludwig Kaiser vs. Dragon Lee from WWE August 15th. I rarely go out of my way for WWE C shows, but this was really good for what it was. I think if you dropped this into an episode of Raw or SmackDown, you'd see more discussion about it. And last but not least, Mayu Iwatani vs. Momo Watanabe from Stardom August 15th. I don't have a lot to say about the early stages of the 5-star, but this pairing was bound to put something together decent. I think it's a case where stacking the deck against Mayu with all the run-ins benefited the match, and it was easy to invest in her. And that is it from me. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I had to say. Be sure to do all the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing, and find me on socials at Outer Stavon, including Blue Sky. Many are switching over to that platform, and I've been over there for some time now, so feel free to say hello. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again when we wrap up the month of August.